the Hebrew tense is the young woman has conceived. She's pregnant. Before she gives birth, before the child she bears is very old, you won't have these political problems anymore. So it's a young woman has conceived. It's not a virgin will conceive. And it's not talking about a future Messiah. It's talking about some woman here who's pregnant, and about what's going to happen to the city. So it's not even a messianic prophecy. It's not a prophecy of a future Messiah.
What's important here to note, too, is that alma actually is referring to an unmarried woman, but in a betrothal stage, someone who's not married but who is betrothed to be married. Eugene Penteuk, who is an expert in Semitic languages, points out that the term alma may be derived from the word for hidden. In other words, the veiled one, and a woman who is betrothed is of a particular age. It would be preparing for marriage, and she would be a veiled one. So the prophecy may then refer to a person, a young woman, who is definitely a virgin, yet who is not yet married, but in the betrothal stage. And this word not only connotates virginity, but a young woman and someone who is not yet married, but is betrothed.
You made a point, and I think it's an important point to make, but you emphasize, and I want to know why you emphasize, because Ehrman makes a point that, by the way, the translation is not she will conceive. The translation is she has already conceived. And we would agree with Bart Ehrman here.
Yeah.
But what does that mean?
Yeah, and it's a funny thing, because when you watch the video, you're thinking, okay, so he's debunked something, because people often think of, well, the prophecy is that she will conceive, because of maybe the way that it's written in Matthew is that she will conceive. And so this is a prophecy of the future, and it's going to be about Mary. And so it's not really a big thing, because this woman will conceive of a child, and by the time the kid is 2 years old, you'll be out of trouble, Ahaz, so don't worry about it. He's probably correct that the correct interpretation is that the alma has already conceived. That doesn't mean she's not a virgin. In fact, it's that she will not conceive. His point actually proves too much, because what would be so miraculous about a prophecy that says a virgin will conceive? Well, everybody who has conceived the first time was a virgin at some point, so what's the big deal? Don't we expect a betrothed woman to conceive eventually? So it's not really that miraculous of a prophecy. But Ehrman goes to great pains to point out that it's that she already has conceived, as if she's not an alma, but she is an alma. She is betrothed, and she's currently a virgin and currently with child. That is a miracle. So Ehrman's interpretation of the passage is that it is prophesying a miracle, not a mundane fact. So that to me is actually much more strongly in favor of Matthew applying it to Jesus himself. Like I said, it proves too much, and that it agrees with the traditional Christian understanding of the prophecy. Understanding that Alma has conceived actually makes the prophecy clearer, that the unmarried yet betrothed, engaged virgin woman who has already conceived. Well, I got to say something. This fits the bill exactly for Mary. She is a virgin woman who is unmarried and yet betrothed, and she already has conceived by the time that she gets married. So this fits the bill perfectly. So in trying to disprove it, he actually goes a little further towards proving it.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the missing that, and I he's not a Hebrew scholar, and we've kind of consulted people that are experts in Hebrew to look at some of this. So, and I wonder if he had a more firm grasp on alma, he would see that, like, oh, but alma has already conceived. That's a problem. But, so what I want to transition to next, and I think that's, people can pause here because that's an important point that you just made to sort of think about, that the already conceived is huge. But I want to transition a little bit now to even talk about, like, where did Matthew get this from? Did he have no understanding of the context? Was he just out on a limb here again, one more time, trying to prove something that wasn't really there? Because that's what a lot of like critical scholars will say about Matthew. But Matthew does not pull this out of thin air at all. This was very much within the sort of Jewish milieu at the time. And so, for instance, he's quoting from the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And so this part was potentially translated 200 years or so before Matthew ever wrote his gospel. And they translated the term alma to Parthenos, which they mentioned in the video, that pretty much always means virgin. There's one exception in Genesis 34, verse 4, where this is used towards someone who's been kind of sexually abused. So that we can parse that out. But every other instance, it's clearly referencing someone who is a virgin. That it meant virgin essentially. And given that every translation is perhaps in some sense an interpretation, you see that here were some ancient Jewish people, trying to bring the Bible to the Greek culture they were now in, and they interpreted, before the Christians got their hands on it, they interpreted what Isaiah was saying as referring to a virgin. So that idea is already in the culture. This is not Christians making this up to try and prove something about Jesus. So this is what Matthew's doing, and I think what the Septuagint is doing, based on what we've already said about the Hebrew text, is these are faithful interpretations based on what people thought was going to be happening. And what the Septuagint did was they took out all vagueness in the term. That perhaps there was some vagueness there, but they just say Parthenos. We'll just say virgin, so everyone just gets it. It's very, these Greek people may not understand the Hebrew word to have all these nuances to it, so we'll just give them the word for virgin so that they get really clearly what the miraculous nature of this sign was going to be. So in other words, this sign was not a surprise pregnancy like Dr. Ehrman is trying to sort of say it is. It was it really was meant to be this miraculous sign. The sign was not simply that the child would be proof that God was going to save Israel, but rather the child himself was prophesied to be the salvation of Israel. And that is the key there, and that's what they understood at the time. And so ancient Jewish people viewed this, so even outside of the Septuagint, and even in the early years after Christianity, they still viewed this text as messianic, sort of until Christians came along and they kind of changed their mind based on Christians' interpretation of it. And we see that a lot of like rabbinic Judaism sometimes is in direct response to Christian interpretation and theology.